back to another video.
Yeah.
It's not just Larry and I today. We have a special guest, Anastasia, with us. And we're so excited to just have a conversation with her, all things mental health, anxiety, depression. We're going to kind of just sit with her and talk with her about that. And we hope that it just blesses you guys and can encourage you guys and meet you right where you're at, because we know that this is something a lot of people struggle with. Anastasia, just kind of introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and then we'll go from there.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here with seriously the best people in the world. So my name is Anastasia. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I run, operate, and own my own practice, AB Counseling, which stands for Always Becoming, because I feel like we're always in the process of becoming who God has called us to be through our mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And so that's
awesome.
who I am. Yeah.
So kind of tell us, how did you get into like the mental health kind of, like, you have a passion for it.
I have
and you like really care to see girls and people like get help and to help them overcome this. So what made you get that passion? Where did that start in you?
Okay, so this is a really funny story, but 100% true.
Okay.
Britney Spears got me.
Wait, I don't even think I knew this.
Britney Spears got me into counseling, and I'm not even
Shout out Britney Spears.
So when I was in like middle school or high school, I don't think People magazine does this anymore, but they used to do like monthly or weekly subscriptions, and my mom signed up for one.
Okay.
So every week we would get a brand new People magazine, and I would read it from front to back, cover to cover, because I just was always amazed at the stories. And I was never like, oh my gosh, it's a celebrity. I always saw the human in them. I'm like, oh, like who's with them? Like who's walking through life with them?
Yeah.
So then of course 2007 happens, which I don't know if half you guys were born then, but 2007 happens, and it's, you know, she's on every paper and you know, having this mental breakdown, shaving her head, and I read it and I start crying, and I'm like, nobody's holding her hand through this, nobody's like helping her, and I literally was like, I gotta help people like Britney Spears.
Wow.
And so that's
Britney, if you're watching this,
that's literally how I got into it. It was like through Britney Spears, and like feeling just my heart breaking for her, because people were mocking her, but I'm like, who's like holding her heart and then working with her emotions and mind, and you know, because that's all that to say, that's how I got into what I do, Britney Spears.
When,
and I'm still a Britney
so
stan.
Cool.
Yeah. When was this? Like when in your...
So that was like, I was a junior or senior
in high school.
Okay. And so and then I went to Southeastern, studied psychology and human services, and then got my master's, and then started building the practice.
Wow.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. What do you see the most of? Like when it comes to your clients and patients, like is there one thing that you see most of them? Like is anxiety a big one? Is depression, or is it all kind of
there's like different seasons for different things, right? Where right now, I was just talking to a fellow counselor as well. We were talking, who works in like the same demographic as I do. We're seeing a lot of like EDs right now, which is eating disorders, and so that's really big right now. But you know, the staples are definitely anxiety and depression, and which after COVID, those have just risen to a whole new height. And so a lot of people struggling with like debilitating depression, or really struggling with even like social anxiety. I hear a lot, you know, people coming like, I don't know how to have conversations with people. I don't know how to like people don't call it anymore. It's just text or snap, like. And so they get nervous, even like making a phone call for.
Sorry about that.
They even get nervous, like making a phone call to like order food or something. What we assume is simple, but for them is like, it takes every ounce of energy.
Wow.
And so.
Wow.
Yeah.
When it comes to, I didn't realize that with eating disorders that's becoming bigger and bigger. Because I've had friends in the past when I was like in elementary that they struggle with that. So, people that are dealing with that, where do you think that eating disorder stems from? Like what starts that, and how can people that have friends that are dealing with that, how can they support that person? Or
so I think it's weird, because I feel like certain things are like trending, and not trending where it invalidates the person struggling with it, but trending in the sense you'll just see like a surge of it. So because like I was raised in the early 2000s where eating disorders were a big thing, the diet fads and Atkins and Weight Watchers, and you know, but they were packaged as healthy lifestyle, but really, you know, were eating disorders in the making. And so then we came to a place of like, okay, embrace your body, but now culturally, if you look again, who's being promoted, a lot of like thin and a certain type of look. So some of that contributes to eating disorders in the sense of like, if I want to become an influencer, if I want to become big, so they associate, I have to look this way in order to bring this to, you know, the table. And then other things would be like self-esteem is the idea of like, words are powerful, and sometimes when you grow up in a certain environment of like, oh, you look so good, you look so good, and it's so focused on physical appearance, people feel the pressure to have to keep up the physical appearance. But what then happens is they become obsessed with the physical appearance. Like, I've worked with girls where, you know, they wanted to become healthy, which is nothing wrong with that. So she started working out and, you know, started losing a little bit of weight, and everybody knows, oh, wow, you look so good. And what happens is they attach to that, okay, now they notice me, somebody who's never seen me before, I feel seen, so I have to keep this up, but then it becomes dangerous. And so that can be a big factor in it. And I think people who are walking through it, the biggest thing that people can do is, number one, validate that it's a struggle and it's something that's real. And something I teach, like sometimes, a lot of times with parents, I'll teach, is non-physical compliments to give your daughter, because words really are powerful. And so like, hey, you are so smart, or like, you know, focusing on things outside the physical body, and encouraging them in other areas, and recognizing like, to be healthy and whole doesn't just mean you go into the gym 24/7. Find what works for you, enjoy life, and recognize like it's a mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical thing to be healthy. And so helping people on their journey, you know, definitely help validate, but also help recognize that it's not your responsibility to heal and like fix them either. You know, and so, because I see that a lot too, where it's like, oh, I just tell them to eat, I just do this, I just do that.
So like, why isn't anything happening?
And so, but being a support, and I think focusing on other things outside the physical context helps.
Great. I feel like I hear a lot of people too, they say like, non-physical compliments go such a long way, because I think we're such an image-driven culture where it's like, it's all about looks. And so I think when, like, I know for even me, like when I receive a compliment that's not about my appearance, but like my character, who I am, that sticks with me so much more than like, oh, like, nice hair today, like, you know. And so I think people desire that. So that's really good. And I think that's great for people to know of, like, you know, I even think of like a Bible verse of like, man looks at the hour, but the Lord looks at the heart. So as people that, like, if you're following Jesus and you and you're walking with him, like, let's be people that look at the heart of people and acknowledge who they are and the heart that God's given them, and affirm people in that, because it's not all about the looks. And so that makes me think of, I mean, social media is huge in that. So tell us how social media plays a part, pros and cons, and like, what are practical steps that you give girls to kind of help them put boundaries up with social media and everything to help with anxiety, depression, and all of that?
Social media is big. And I'm a fan of it. I'm not that person that's like, no, don't ever have it.
Same.
I do think there needs to be boundaries and an understanding that social media does create harm. It's kind of that concept of like, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. So I truly believe like there's good intent, like you can connect, you can create, you can, you know, there's a lot of good out there, but with the good also comes heavy, hard, and even bad. And so when it comes to like the way that our brain processes things when we see things, it does create a sense of anxiety, or you know, can lead us into depression, because what's happening is we're taking in information we were never meant to intake at the amount that we are intaking it. So like, I tell my girls all the time, because like, I did grow up in the early 2000s, we didn't have social media at our fingertips. Like, I remember in 1997 when Princess Diana had died, like, I didn't know anything until I got home, and that was on the news, and that's the only reason I knew. Or even 9/11, we didn't know right away until it was on the news. And so what's happening now is, you know, people who are 12, 13, 14 years old, they have access to news and information, and scary things like with COVID, like, I mean, everything that you read about was dark and heavy, and things that they were never meant to be exposed to, their brains weren't meant to be exposed to. So it created a panic in all of us, and it created a fear, because we're seeing news after news, and then we saw conflicting things, and I mean, it's just a mess. And so when it comes to social media and your mental and emotional health, it really is important to figure out, how do we set boundaries around that, because not even just like the bad things, but even good things. But then it's like, oh, I see somebody's aesthetic, or I see somebody
Yes,
posting, or
totally.
this girl has blown up, or
Yes.
this person's blown up,
Yeah.
and now I'm becoming obsessed with blowing up
Right.
instead of creating good content.
Right.
And so, which is a natural thing to want to be good or to be seen and to be heard. And so I think a lot of us have struggled with the idea of like, you know, followers don't equate to friendships. Likes don't equate to relationships,
Yes,
you know?
that's good.
And I think we're now looking at like I have a girl that I worked with years ago where every post that didn't get, I think, above like 300 likes, she would delete and just take off. And like, I mean, it was real. And so we would work through that. And I said, it's important to understand, like, I understand you want people to see you and to like you, but we're putting so much value into people who have no authority to speak into our lives.
They don't even know us.
Literally, literally, they're from across the pond, the world.
Yeah.
And so even people we go to school with, it's like you don't have a relationship with them, but we're so hungry for them to be like, oh, I saw it, I liked it, because we feel validated in that. And so I think, again, like too much of a good thing can become a bad thing. And so it's figuring out, number one, I will say this, when it comes to getting social media, the later the better. More and more studies are proving that, like, if you can wait for, and this is hard because it's a weird dynamic because, you know, kids want to fit in and they want to have the social media, but the parents who hold off, like, as much as that is hard at home, I'm sure, you're doing your kid a favor. Like, you're doing your kid a favor because the way that the brain develops is your brain's not fully developed until about 25 years old. And the stinky part is your brain that's developed first is like your hormones and emotions. So those hormones and emotions are just firing, and that's like happens around middle school. That's why middle school is horrible.
Why
So
they crazy?
You got it. Yeah, you got it. And so middle school is horrible in the sense of like it's just hard.
It's a
Oh,
hard
it's
season.
hard.
Yeah, for
All
sure.
those hormones.
Oh, it's so
everything.
hard. And then you have social media on top of it, comparing your life to everybody else.
And the middle schoolers in this generation.
Oh, it's so hard.
Oh gosh, they have all of it.
I
And
can't
it's like,
imagine.
me neither.
Yeah, yeah. And so, you know, but yeah, with the brain, so all that's going, and then the logic piece, so the frontal lobe, which is all the logic, which, you know, helps things make sense. You're like, okay, we can be angry, but we don't have to react out the anger. That part of the brain isn't fully developed until 25. But people are getting social media at like 12, 13, as soon as those emotions and hormones and awareness, hyper awareness is starting to be developed. And so it's hard to regulate, it's hard to set those boundaries. So honestly, parents need to, like, they can play a really big role in that, as hard as that is at home. But also just, I think, like, encouraging your heart and mind of like, okay, as soon as I start to feel off, I need to get off. And that's something that's something that I've taught girls is like, your body will tell you that, hey, you're in distress right now.
It's time to
Get off. You know, even for myself as a 30-something-year-old, you know, I have a hard time where I'm like, ooh, too many sad dog videos. I got to get off. Like, it's not doing anything for me right now. And so there is definitely a close connection between what we intake via social media and our mental and emotional health. And the hard part is to, on top of everything else, is, I don't know if you guys notice, like, if you're ever struggling, where do we go to first?
Social media.
If we're bored, where do we go to first? First thing in the morning, where do we go to first? So it really has taken over everything. So it's a lot of undoing that has to happen for us to become, like, healthier in that area. But you know, taking small steps, like something to try is like each phone has the ability to set like time limits on it. And then you have to make the choice to ignore it. Or you're like,
I ignore it way too many times.
I'm like, I ignore it all day. You know, that's normal. But like something that like kind of stops you and like, do I need to continue, or can I do something else? So that can be something that's helpful, or even just challenging yourself, like, what would it look like if I just took a day off? You know, like people are like, I'm just gonna take a whole year. You don't have to do a whole year.
Don't go extreme. You know?
Just take a day and see, like, and then at the end of the day, how did I feel? How did I think? How did I like connect? And you know, go from there and build off of that.
That's great. I know I don't know if I've told you this, but I started doing Saturdays are my days off. So like on Saturdays, I'm like, I am deleting it and I'm not getting on it. And I think for me, like, I love social media. Like,
me too.
I love it. Like, I love like that you can be creative and you can connect with people through it. But I will say, like, it's so funny to me that I will believe, like, the fear and lie that I'm going to have all this FOMO if I take a day off. And I'm like, and I'll get back on Sunday, And I literally told Leah, I'm like, I missed nothing.
No,
like,
no.
and why am I so concerned with like all these people's lives that a lot of them I don't really know.
No.
And so it's just funny, like, because even like for me, I'm 20, so I was born in 2002.
Yeah.
So when I was born, like I grew up like. I've never known what it's like to not have a phone, which is crazy. And so it's like, since I was like out of the womb, like there was I didn't have a phone out of the womb, but like that would have been concerning. Thanks, Mom and Dad, for not doing that. But it's just crazy to think like I've always just known what that is, and I've known nothing else. So I just think like a day, even like you don't have to do a whole year, like we do, but like taking a day and building up, it has helped me so much, and it's helped me to be more present. It like I don't feel as irritable when I'm like not on it, and it just is a good thing. And even Larry, like he's had to definitely keep me accountable, and like he's seen, because even my mom this past month, she was like, I'm just gonna take some time off as long as I need, and I don't even know when I'm gonna get back on yet. And it was funny because my mom and I were off the same time, and we were sitting in the living room with my dad, and I was like, Mom, I just feel like I'm so less irritable, and like even, I don't know if this is a thing, but like I didn't feel as tired all the time because my eyes were always looking at the screen, so I didn't feel as tired. And my mom was like, me too. My dad was like, honestly, like to my mom, I've noticed like a good change in you, you know. And so I just think like those fast and breaks like can be really good and really healthy, because again, it's not a bad thing. It's just, how do you use it, and how do you manage it? So so that's awesome.
And then you also do the whole like at 9 p.m. you get
Oh yes, I definitely fail at that a lot. I will say, just keeping it real on here.
Love it.
But I do have a goal.
Hey, that's awesome.
But
That's
I do have a goal. 9
Yeah.
p.m. Like I need to get off. Need to turn my mind off and just unwind. So anyways, time limits, guys, let's be people that follow through with those things.
Well, no, I think even having the intent of like, okay, 9 p.m. because I think sometimes we feel like if we're not perfect at it, we don't even attempt it.
Right.
It's like, no, sometimes like you're gonna be human and be like, it's 10:30, we'll just keep going. But then it's like, wait, no, I want to work on the 9 p.m.
I want to be better.
And so I think even just having that intention and that goal, and I also think too, like you were talking about the tired thing, anxiety drains us. And we get anxious, and I don't think people understand that, like even subconsciously there's an anxiety that's like fueling the obsessive trait of like having to continue to go, because it's like, well, I'm missing this, I need to do this, I need to sign up for this, I need to pay for this, but you don't need to buy anything that they're telling you to buy.
No.
And so, but that's like how our brain works subconsciously, and sometimes we're aware of it and sometimes we're not. But I like to say, you're gonna feel more energized, you're gonna feel just even more connected to people. Because it literally does a toll on your body. Like when it comes to your mental and emotional health, like it affects your spiritual health, impacts your mental and emotional space, and definitely your physical space. That's why it's so connected. But social media can like literally mentally and emotionally drain you as well as physically drain you. So that's true.
So that makes sense. That's understandable.
What are like some ways that you'd say, and this is, let's say I'm completely ignorant on this, but like when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to depression, are there ways that you could like kind of prepare yourself and kind of almost get yourself kind of battle ready, I guess, before you even do that? You know, it's like a more of a proactive than reactive. Is there a way to do that?
So I literally just had this conversation with somebody the other day, and I explained it like a marathon, right? Where when we're implementing healthy coping skills, like moving our body for a couple minutes or 30 minutes a day, whatever that looks like, you don't have to be a runner, but moving your body, or just being mindful of what you eat, or getting some more sleep, or taking a break from social media, things like that we can do maybe on a more daily basis that doesn't require much, but it changes much. It's kind of like a marathon where it's like you're not going to just feel different the next day. And so healthy coping skills, it takes a minute. Like a marathon, you're not going to just sign up and run the next day when you've never ran before. You literally have to prepare your physical body to get to the place. And so you're going to start with just the block, and then go half a mile, and then so on and so forth. And so that's the same with healthy coping skills. It's like it's consistency and continuing to choose to show up for yourself and putting those in place in and out of hard seasons. Because sometimes what we do is also we're like, okay, hard season, now to just do everything and like, you know, make sure I'm taking care of myself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. But then it gets easier, like life is good and we're coasting, and then we don't practice any of those skills. But those skills are the proactive measure to making sure, like, you know, when the anxiety strikes, we may not be able to completely avoid it, and that's not the point, but we're aware of it. Because sometimes when we're aware of it, we're like, okay, I know what this feeling is, I know what, you know, I need to work more on, or I know that I can back off or do this. And so it creates an awareness when we're more proactive in taking care of our mental and emotional health. So really a lot of like the holistic ways of, you know, again, sleep and eating and moving your body and things like that, that can be great and proactive. Also to getting in a healthy community.
That's huge.
That's a big one, because again, when you start to feel off or things get hard, people can notice, hey, something's off here, and we're gonna like lean into that. And I think too, that's something else I'm seeing a lot, is like people don't have healthy community. And it's really hard to make friends as adults, as kids, whatever, like it's hard. But it's so important, because I always say, like, with mental illness, it will thrive in isolation.
Yes, if
it
you
will
don't tell
thrive
anyone.
and you'll like, it'll overwhelm you, but it doesn't stand a chance when you're in healthy community. And so really building healthy community in and out of, you know, hard seasons is another big one. And, you know, believer or not, like, you know, faith or not, science has proven when you have some sort of faith, when you have some sort of connection to something higher than yourself, mentally and emotionally, you do a lot better. And so, you know, faith can be a big part of that. So your spiritual walk, what does that look like? And also recognizing, because sometimes in hard seasons, you're not going to be able to do what you were doing before. So you have to like shift it a little bit. So maybe like instead of reading 45 minutes a day that you used to do in easier seasons, this hard season, maybe it's just 5 minutes. So that's another big thing too, is like being able to adjust and shift your mindset. Like, what I was doing in old seasons and previous seasons, I can't take into this new season. And I have to honor that and respect that and see that. And so, but all that to say, like, your spiritual walk is actually a really big part in your mental and emotional place as well. So again, it's that whole big circle where it's like your mental and emotional body impact your physical body, which impacts your spiritual body. And if one's out of order, they're all out of order. And so I think simple things like that, though, can be great proactive measures, but it's consistency. It's trying, sometimes it's trying new things, and then it's also being able to be flexible enough to allow what works stay, and then what doesn't work, you can let it go.
That's good. When it comes to like fighting anxiety and depression, or let me ask this first, 'cause as I'm saying this, I keep thinking whenever I say anxiety, I say depression.
Those coexist. Yep.
Okay, cool.
Those often go hand in hand. If you have one, you more than likely struggle with the other.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So with that, would you say, do you think it's very likely that you could get to a point where you no longer struggle with that, or would you say that for people it will more than often?
That's a heavy question. That's a good one. So, spiritually speaking, I believe that we serve a God that can restore, deliver, and set us free, 1,000%. I also believe that, you know, anxiety doesn't cancel out anointing, and so I think sometimes we invalidate our anointing or our calling because we struggle with anxiety. And there's no like right answer of like, well, this is why you struggle with it, this is why this person got free and you didn't get free. So I always want to be careful in that language of like, I do believe it can be gone and you can be completely free. I also believe if you still struggle with it, you're still called and you have a purpose and there's anointing on you. And so I think practically speaking, I think when it comes to anxiety, it really is just like a irrational deep fear of something that hasn't yet happened or something that's not really real. And so when it comes to like thinking processes, there are like coping skills, or there are things to help diminish them. Some, again, even from the practical side, sometimes people do live more of an anxiety-free life, and then some people, they just learn how to control it better or work through it differently and not overwhelm them. And so sometimes the way I describe it is like there are some people who are like literally being eaten alive by anxiety. So if we can just like, you know, if we can get to a point where they're no longer overtaken by it, but they can overtake it in those moments, that's success, 100%. And then there's some who, there's just a situation where it's like, it created a lot of anxiety and, you know, we're able to work through that and then they're good. You know, so everybody's journey is so different and so unique in that. And so I think both can exist where people do become completely free of it. And then people just learn how to manage it where it doesn't overtake them, but they can overtake it.
That's great. Okay, there was a few questions asked. So I was gonna say answer these, but I'm not answering them. I'm asking them. No. You got all the wisdom. The first question that was asked. Oh, well, I'll preface with saying I put a question. You're probably like, what? I put a question box on my Instagram story and just asked, what are some questions you have on mental health? And a few people had. These are some good questions. So I'll ask just a few to you. But one of them is. So when it comes to mental health, what is my responsibility and what is my family's?
Ooh. Okay, this answer's not going to be fun.
Okay, here we go.
You have to get to a point where your family is not responsible for your healing. Now, it doesn't mean they didn't cause a lot of trauma or hurt or disappointment, and so it doesn't take away from that. But I think, and I see this a lot, so that's why I say that. I see it a lot where they're in this state where it's like, well, my parents did this and my family did that, and I'm like, you have every right to that anger.
To be upset.
You have every right to that hurt and that disappointment. You have every right to feel the way that you feel against them. What's happening though is now you're staying stuck in this place of resentment when you should be moving forward. We can't control what they did. We can't control who they are. We can't, you know, manage their response and reactions and unhealthiness. We only have a say-so in our own healing. And so, again, it doesn't mean that what has happened to them or what maybe family or the system has created for them is fair and that's not cool. Like, that's valid, like, to feel that. But at some point, you have to come to a place of, like, I can't hold my family anymore to, you know, I can't hold them to the standard I have for them to fix and change and transition because maybe they're not capable of that, but I am. And so what that can look like is like you start to go to therapy, you start breaking out generational things. And I've seen that where like I have people who come in my office and like I'm the first to ever go to therapy. I'm like, okay, well,
that's awesome. That's a start.
And I said, well, this stops with you. This stops with you. And so I think, you know, recognizing that we can understand that family created a lot of mess and chaos and whatnot, but we also can't, like, we also have to make the decision, what are we going to do moving forward? And sometimes that means moving forward without them, where it's like, okay, and that's a whole nother conversation, but it's like, okay, that doesn't mean they can be in your life and, you know, whatever. It can mean, okay, now it's boundaries and, you know, things that they're not allowed in because of what they've done and they haven't taken ownership for. And so, but yeah, I think you know, at some point it has to be, especially if, you know, you're out away from their house, because sometimes I will say it's hard to heal in a place that you've been hurt. So that's real. But sometimes, like, I have grown adults who have jobs or, like, you know, are in college or pursuing what they meant to pursue, but they're literally stuck because they're stuck in the resentment. It's like concrete, where it's like if you step in it and you don't move fast enough, you're gonna get stuck in it. And so it's like some of us are in concrete and we have to start moving before we get stuck. And so all that to say, I think it's family can be responsible, I guess, for the hurt, but you're responsible for your healing.
That's great. Wow.
So good.
I don't have anything else to add. That was boom, drop the mic, repeat it again. Another question is, how can I help someone who is struggling with existential anxiety and depression? I almost couldn't say that.
Can you break that? Can you define that first?
Yeah, that's like,
because I'm like, what?
I'm trying to think, because people get into like existential crisis where it's like an overwhelming,
that's
like,
how I've heard it before.
Like overwhelming place where it's almost like they can't come back to being present, where they're so focused on like 10 years ahead where they can't focus on the day ahead. And so, and I think that's maybe what they're meaning.
Yeah.
It's like they become so overwhelmed and so engrossed in the anxiety and depression that nothing else is present. They're probably off in like a mental and emotional, like outer space, if that makes sense. And so what was the question again?
How can I help someone who's struggling with that? Yeah.
I think the biggest struggle for somebody who is struggling with that is being present. Which I think a lot of us actually struggle with, is being present and being like in tune with what's happening and not worried about what's going to happen or what has happened. And so I think as a friend watching somebody work through that, I mean, there's like things like, hey, like you can be an encourager for sure. You can, you know, and sometimes what will happen, people in that space will experience a lot of panic attacks or a lot of just like, anxiety or panic attacks. And so something that could be helpful is sometimes we tell people, okay, just breathe, you got this, whatever, which sounds great, but breathing is the last thing on their mind right now because it's like, it seems like the easiest solution, but it's the hardest thing for them to find in that moment. So something that could be really helpful is you notice them starting to go into a panic, you sit down with them and you breathe with them, like, okay, follow after me, and you know, literally mimic what they need to be doing, because it's a lot easier to see and follow than hear and do. And so that could be like something simple. But I think too, like as friends of somebody who's struggling with that, I think encouraging therapy can be really helpful, or mentorship, or because I know therapy is like, wow, it's so much money and all that stuff. Right. Sometimes you just gotta invest in yourself. Like if you can invest in that skincare, you can invest in your mental health. So
that'll preach.
But you know, I know people out there really do have a hard time affording it. So like sometimes if they're in a church community, like pastors or mentors or, you know, healthy people who will be able to provide safe places to process instead of like a judgmental, you know, place to feel like shame and judge. Right. Because people often feel shame and judgment on their own, and they don't need other people judging and condemning and shaming. And so being able to provide safe places, I think the biggest piece of advice that I could give for a friend who is helping somebody else is remembering that as a friend, you're not a therapist. And I say that not in like a demeaning, like invalidating really way, good. But I know for me growing up, I always took on the therapist role. And and if you're an empath out there, I know you do that a lot too, where it's like, oh, I got, like, they're feeling sad, I'm gonna feel sad, and I'm gonna sit with them. But what happens is, like, we go into this pit with them, but we never bring a ladder to get out of the pit. So when it comes to, you know, being a friend, it's like, okay, we can empathize with them, but we can't sit in the pit with them too long, because then we take on what they're putting off. And so recognizing that, okay, know your own capacity. The best thing that you can do for somebody struggling is making sure you're in a healthy place. You can't, you know, be unhealthy, or you can't lack boundaries and try to help somebody who's struggling. And that doesn't make you a less friend. That doesn't make you, you know, less person. Because I think sometimes too, we're like, well, I couldn't help them through it, I'm a horrible person. But sometimes we have to recognize what's our responsibility and what's not. And so I think making sure, like, you have boundaries and the understanding that at the end of the day, you're not the therapist, you're a friend, and finding that, you know, balance.
That's really good.
Yeah, it's so good. What, like, kind of continuing with the conversation on this, like, what would you say you do to not hold on to that, to not carry that weight? Because I'm thinking, like, I know so much people that carry that. I would say, like, even for me as a pastor, sometimes it's really hard to kind of, like, you know, like I would say this past month, I feel like my heart was heavy, you know, with a lot. How do you, like...
So I'll share what I do, because obviously being in the field that I am, like, and being an empath, that's something I've always struggled with, and I know people in ministry struggle with. If you work with people, you're probably going to have that, you're going to have that dilemma. And so I think the best thing for me is what I do is, like, when the person's with me in the moment, so like when I'm in my therapy session, I am there 100% mind, body, and soul. I am there, I'm crying with them, I'm laughing with them, I am connected to them. Because again, at the end of the day, especially when you're working with people, ministry, therapy, whatever, they want to know that you see them, feel them, and hear them. And so you don't want to be like, okay, what's going on? Like, but you want to, you know, be engaged. And so I allow myself that. But once they exit the office, that also has to stop for me too. So what I've done is, like, you know, if I have a heavy day, I'll like text Nick, like, going to Target, and he knows what that means, like, because it's literally my space where I just walk through the aisles. I don't even buy anything, which is pretty impressive.
That is very
impressive. I know.
Okay.
I mean, not every time. And so, but I'll walk through the aisles. What works for me is listening to worship music or listening to something that's the opposite of what I just experienced. So
that's good.
With therapy, it's a lot of heavy and dark and just emotional things. So something I also do is I protect myself from like certain TV shows or certain podcasts or certain things that will just only enable or prolong the feeling I'm already feeling. So really just taking care of your own health and mental health. And I think too, like, also recognizing like when you're in distress, when your body's like, okay, you can't do anymore, because again, we all have certain cups of capacity. That's why every Friday I try to take off, because I'm like, okay, Friday, like, that's a day I get to just relax, or I get to do what I want to do, or not have to engage in like heavy, like, and hold people's stories and vulnerability. And so I think that also helps too, where it's like I take that time for myself. So really learning how to separate yourself, but I think the biggest thing is like once they leave, that has to leave with them. Like so, even in my office, like if I have 10 minutes in between, I'll like blast worship music, and I'll just like stretch and allow my like heart and mind to be realigned for a minute, so I can also then engage with the next person as well.
Wow.
And then simple things like reminding myself their story, it's a privilege to carry, but it's not my responsibility to fix. So like really reminding myself of things like that too. And so things like that I think tend to help.
That's great.
Separate.
Wow. So good.
That's really, really good.
Yeah.
The last question. Yeah. I'm just like, wow, I should be taking notes right now.
Gosh.
I'm not even kidding you. This is good.
You guys are the best encouragers.
I will say, like, but I'm really liking what you say, because I feel like I can even be a person and friend. Like, I feel like I need to like fix someone, or like if they're entrusting you with something to walk through with them, like I feel like you saying like you're a friend, not their therapist. It's like I don't need to feel like I have to like walk with them in a way of a therapist. So, like, just be their friend, like encourage them, be present, like support them, like ask them what they need as a friend. And so I even think that's an encouragement to me, because I have some close friends that are walking through some heavy stuff right now, and I'm walking through it with them, and I can feel this burden of like, oh my gosh, I need to like fix them, and I need to like help them, and it's like no, like I just need to be their friend. And so like giving them grace and giving myself grace, and so knowing it's a journey.
It is. And something I encourage people, like I've found myself in situations like personal life where there's some people where I'm like, am I mentally and emotionally ready to engage? And if you're not, don't engage, like phone calls or hangouts or anything like that. Sometimes we feel like we have to say yes to everything, because like, oh, they need me, I gotta go. It's like, wait, no, where am I at mentally, emotionally? Like, am I able to engage? And then the other thing too is like something I have found myself doing sometimes. Sometimes empathy will turn into enabling when there's no boundaries, because sometimes and I don't think it's maliciously done, but sometimes when we give people like, oh, I'm here, whether it's finances, mental, emotional, I'm here, here you go, they're going to take advantage of that. It's like, oh, this person's always going to be there.
Wow.
So now we're enabling and maybe even stalling their own healing, because we're always readily available. And so that's something else I've reminded myself of, like, oh, I'm, it's almost like having a savings account, right? Where it's like you put time, effort, and money into the savings account, and they have free access to it. So they drain you every month, and you're like, wait, where did all my money go? It's like, well, there was no locker key, and you gave them access to something that they were never meant to have access to. So that's another way to think about it.
Yeah, that's really good. Do you have anything else to say?
No, I think this was good.
Yeah. I'm like, run it back. So I'm going to be watching this when we upload it. I don't watch all of our videos. Man, this was great. I'm genuinely encouraged, and I feel like I learned so much. So we hope that you guys are encouraged, and as someone maybe where you deal with this, or you're a friend that knows people that deal with it, you feel more equipped as a friend to walk with your friends or your loved ones through this, and as someone who may be struggling with it, to know, like, I think a big thing that, like, I feel like you shared that stuck with me is like, share it with someone and don't isolate yourself in it, and find healthy community with people that won't let you sit in it, but will call you higher and encourage you to get to a place where you're more healed and you're better than you were a month ago. And so don't let don't let the enemy like tell you that someone's gonna think differently of you and judge you, because we all have things that we struggle with, and we're not meant to do life alone. And so just know you're loved, and I'm sure you have people that want to walk alongside of you. So, and it's like, I think too, something I've heard is like, that doesn't mean you have to post it on Instagram and let everyone in the world know, but let like your trusted few people, core people know about it, and let them walk with you. So thanks so much for this conversation. It was great. It was so good. So and we're just excited for more combos to come. Maybe Nick will be on it next with us. Maybe Anastasia and Nick will do a little like couples conversation. So
Nick also has
Nick
a lot of wisdom.
He does.
Yes,
that's why I married him.
It'll be like a 2-hour video. But we love you guys, and we're just so glad that you tuned in. And so let us know if you want more videos like this, and if this is something that you enjoy watching, because we definitely enjoyed this. So, but we love y'all. You have anything to say?
Peace.
Peace and love. Bye, guys.